Okay. Why don't we go ahead and start, Bree, by just checking in on how you have been doing in the last few weeks in terms of active learning type stuff, keeping classes going, training, things like that.
Well, so I'm a PhD
Perfect.
student
Okay. So how's
and
that going?
right, yeah. So, of course, well, I do basically dry lab in my lab that I'm in. So even before COVID, I was just always on my computer. So now it's just, working kind of all the time.
Yeah.
But no problems there. But so I am in Dr. I'm Dr. Rout's mentee
Oh yeah, yeah.
with the Palm Fellowship. And
Mhm.
so I, this semester, did two lectures for the uh, undergraduate non major introductory to biology course that she's
Very
teaching.
cool. Hmm.
Yeah. And so I love this. I was really excited to talk about this paper because I just gave my second lecture and it was about COVID
Oh yeah.
19. And so, the first lecture for the video, it's like traditional learning, and then this was the active learning lecture. And so it was COVID-19 focused and everything. And I'm just still waiting for the students to one complete the activity. And so the activity is a misconception debunking, like little
Hmm.
4 or 5 question quiz,
Nice.
and also their survey to see how they, compared both lectures, um, what they feel they got out of it and stuff like that. So basically, it's like this paper is literally what I'm trying to do right now. And so I thought that was great.
Excellent.
Yeah. And so just in getting into the paper, segueing to the paper, like I one totally agree, with the focus of this paper
Yeah.
about teaching not just the rhetoric of you got to read your articles and you got to read a lot of primary articles and understand how to decipher them and stuff like that, but actually presenting students with the articles, and not just in a PowerPoint slide like, oh yeah, this article, they did this, they did that, and how it relates to the lecture, but going deeper and actually having a discussion about the article. And so it kind of also hit home on that front because last spring semester I taught a genetics focused seminar, and that was like the main focus of the class. I really wanted to build up their publication reading, of their understanding of how to read articles, primary articles. And then they actually got into groups, and at the end had a group project to pick an article and present an article, like like journal club type of thing. And that really went very well. Now I didn't do any evaluation, but I got.
Anecdotally, it seemed good.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. The students took control, at the basically the project really surmised if those skill sets sunk in
Nice.
for the whole semester, and it really did. I mean, everybody did well. Only one group needed help even choosing an article. Um, yeah, it was great. And also in their evaluate, just normal student evaluations of the class and teacher, uh, great feedback. Great feedback. So,
Wonderful. What was the just describe the class you were doing? What level students are we talking about?
oh, so they were undergraduate genetics focus.
Okay.
And it's funny that this article is by an individual from the University of Alabama.
As you were talking about Sammy, I was thinking that too. It's like,
Right.
oh look,
So
very good.
yes. It's good to see that like other professors at my university are, engaging in this type of methods, in the lecturing. So
It's
it's
very cool. And this in this paper does provide a couple different avenues of discussion, which is why I'd chosen it. It's short, right? And there's actually not a lot here in terms of data. But what I liked it better for was just sort of discussion flashpoints. And so, number one, the idea of using current events. And
Mhm.
so, what can you do COVID-19 wise to get people um, excited about primary literature and looking at a problem in a complicated way. So there's that.
Mhm.
And then also the idea of how to engage undergraduates in effectively doing primary literature, which is something that I've certainly struggled with and
Mhm.
have tried different approaches to try to figure out the best way to ease students into reading technical papers in a way that will um, I don't know if understand is the right word, but get the approach of how to read them, right? Like what you're
Right.
trying to do, what you're not trying to do, that sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so with the class that I taught, during the spring, I gave them a lot. So, how this paper, they gave the students a pre activity that they show in their supplemental section.
Yeah,
And I actually like pulled it up and everything because I really wanted to see it and kind of
sure.
decipher it. And mine kind of went, I guess, a bit more in depth, but it was basically the same thing, of really telling the students what the purpose is, what the goals are, and setting up, questions and what they should really be looking for, how to navigate the paper and everything like that. Um, because at least when I was, undergraduate and learning these things, it was really just doing it yourself.
Yeah.
Like you were told, they shook their finger, you need to read articles, but how? How do I go about that? Like,
Right. And I sometimes fear that I'm doing that and not even realizing it, right? Giving them the
mhm.
right framework. Tell me about this activity that you designed, because I'm actually interested in sort of what your approach was to getting people tuned up for this kind of thing.
Oh, so what for the COVID lecture specifically?
Right. Well, I guess let me your general approach. If they have to read scientific literature, what do you prep them with?
Oh, yeah, okay, so that was not for the course that I'm in right now, that
Okay,
was, yeah, for the spring, and so, yeah, these were undergraduates who were specifically in the
the genetics.
genetic,
Yeah.
like, bachelor program at UAB. And so like the first day, I just commended the students on even being in this program because
Okay.
it's like, you've already narrowed down your niche in science and you're only undergraduates. I was like, that's very commendable. Pat yourself on the back. Y'all are great. And so, you know, I definitely noticed that with this article, all the students were in the immunology undergraduate program. And so I think that there's already a level of commitment that the students have made. And even though they still might be, nervous, scared, apprehensive with approaching primary articles, they definitely kind of already have more of an understanding of I have to do this, whether I like it or not. Like, if I'm going to remain in this field, if I'm going to be successful, this is what I have to do. So I feel like it wasn't as hard to get them into like preparing them for reading the articles throughout the semester and everything, because one, of course, it was already, everything was genomic focus, and so they're already interested in that. And again, they are wanting to be scientists, so they know what they have
Yeah.
to do. I think it would definitely be harder to do that with a non-major course or even just a general biology undergraduate course. It might be a little more like pulling teeth. But
Well, and I like you have an intriguing comment there that actually I can relate to, and that is the idea of commitment to the field.
mhm,
In at my institution, when you get the students in introductory biology, we don't segregate out the majors from the non-majors, and so you will actually have a fair number of people who are sort of a one-time only in science
Mhm.
appearance. And so I don't really want to get into primary literature at that level. Now, if I have a COVID-19, like more popular type article, that could be appropriate for that
Right.
course.
Mhm.
But once I get them in the next class, and they haven't made a commitment to genetics or immunology per se, but they've certainly made a commitment to biology. They
Mhm.
certainly know they want to be scientists. And what you're saying sort of makes me feel better, honestly, about my own choices, because it's like, okay, that seems to be the level where I'm not gonna say get away with, but is more appropriate
Right.
to
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
in and do this kind of toolbox type stuff, right? Doing more, getting these skills with respect to knowing how to read papers up and running. So that makes me feel pretty good.
Yeah,
um,
I came from that type of background where, yeah, my first introductory courses in undergrad were, yeah, this hodgepodge. And you definitely, the professor easily saw the students who were, okay, yeah, they are the science majors, and the others are definitely not. Because, we would discuss and all of that, and we'd be the repetitive, students who were raising our hands, asking questions, discussing in class, whereas the non-majors were more so like, it was okay. It was hard, like those types of responses. But yeah, but as far as the activities that I
yeah.
had for the students leading up to their project, um, yeah, I just had them read articles, and then we'd come in and pretty much discuss it, like serious open discussion. I would have some questions if, the discussion got a little stale, or, it's kind of stopped, but I really didn't have to do that, especially getting into like the fourth, fifth week of class, once everybody kind of got comfortable and was understood that this was a comfortable space and a secure space to really give your opinion, even though, everybody might not agree, or ask those questions that, you might think are stupid, or, oh, I don't want to bring this up in front of everybody.
Sure.
Yeah, once we kind of broke those barriers down, the flow was really nice.
Very cool. And did you do this by figure? Like go around and like explain what's in a figure and how it's
Yes.
done, things like
Oh,
that?
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because they were undergraduates, and so, yeah, they hadn't seen a lot of things still. I tried to pick different types of articles that, yeah, had a variety of things, because I knew, I wasn't sure what articles they were gonna pick, so I definitely wanted to set them up for success in that way.
No, wait, what was that last part? The articles that they picked?
Yeah, so I allowed them to choose an article. I gave them a set
Oh,
time for their groups
yeah.
to choose an article for their project, and only one group needed a little help choosing an article,
Yeah.
but the other groups did well, very well doing that.
Okay, cool. So it was an added sort of ownership component to it, that the students
Right.
selected their own project of interest, if you as you were, for this
Yes.
kind of thing. Very cool.
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah. Mhm.
Um, and I've bounced around with how to lead a class in this sort of thing, because you will get
Mhm.
people who are too afraid to say anything, and you will certainly get people who are willing to talk more than others. Um, I've tried certain things where I assign, like in the class, I'll assign figures to people, like, oh, you're going to talk about figure one, you're going to talk about figure two. And that works sometimes, not all. Like, again, it's dependent on the people you have. When you approach this, how do you get your students to engage with this?
Oh, so I got a little advice from one of my teaching mentors and from the teacher that, was overseeing the course.
Hmm.
And I ultimately ended up putting them in groups, and I grouped them based on how they did on this kind of survey question that I had for the first day. And it was like, some general knowledge things, really. And so I grouped them with some individuals that I really thought were a little more advanced, and the ones that weren't so much, because I wanted them to, be able to learn from each other.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
in doing that, I then also just gave them individual numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 individually. And then so when it came to, hey, can somebody answer this question? Or hey, can somebody come up and explain this figure? I would just randomly call, and go around the room. And what their grade also consisted of participation points. And so they knew that, hey, I have to talk,
At
at
least
least
give it a
say
shot. Yeah.
something. Yes, and I guess I'm definitely not an individual that is afraid of one silence, so when I ask a question, I wait some time. Somebody's gonna answer,
Yeah. Yeah.
wait for somebody to talk.
I know what
And
you're feeling like. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm also not afraid to just randomly call on people, because whether you stay in science or not, more than likely you're gonna have to talk. You're gonna have to communicate to people.
I
So
was just having this conversation earlier today, and I'm trying to remember what the context was, but we were talking about the idea of, regardless of how you do these things, communication skills or teaching soft skills are going to be really important. God, what was I talking about? I definitely oh, I remember now. We were talking about, syllabus development. It was a completely different context, but, like, building in presentation opportunities, because those soft skills of being able to, communicate are gonna be useful regardless of where you go, so I totally respect that.
right.
That's
And
really neat, and because I sometimes struggle with, um, I don't want to humiliate anybody for sure,
right.
but at the same time, I want to make sure people have the opportunity to participate and not get swamped out by the like two or three people that will answer all the questions.
Mhm.
And I've never engaged in and I know there's scholarship on it too. The whole idea of how to make groups and put people together. And so that's really cool that you sort of go in and you assess that level wise. Do you think they get a sense of why you're grouping them together, or do you just present it as, okay, here are the groups?
I just presented as here are the groups.
Yeah, and
Yeah, they would
I
be
imagine if you tried to put like all the best students together and all the worst students together, they'd figure it out. But the fact that you're sort of distributing it,
and
um,
I got that concept from being in band basically my whole life from 5th grade to undergrad.
yeah,
So yeah, my band teacher would do that. He would have us group up with people that, the one person's, first chair
yeah,
and
yeah,
last chair, group them together. So, that person who might be struggling can feed off of that person, but it also, but when we're talking about this type of context, the person that might not be as advanced in the course, they still teach the other individual stuff as well, because they have different perspective, different background, things like that. I also did that as well. I definitely tried to make sure that the groups kind of had a little bit of different backgrounds, so not all males, not all females
yeah,
together, not all the international students, like
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And
so
I should have asked, how many students do you have in this class?
I had, it was like 23, 25. It
Wow,
wasn't
yeah,
a large class at all.
that's a
Yeah.
lot. I mean,
Oh.
for the well, I mean, to have a discussion, I mean, it's as good as you're going to get at a larger school. I am jealous, or I am spoiled, I should say. I'm in a small institution, and so 25 people. You just saw what I did. My default is, oh, so a big class. That's actually for us. That actually runs on the large side. But like at a larger school, that's probably as good as you're going to get, I imagine. And so
Yeah, yeah.
it's still like a challenge of doing it though for that many people, as opposed to like 10 to 12 or something like that. It's certainly. Uh, Keeps you on your toes in terms of trying to keep everybody involved.
This is true. This is
Yeah.
true. Yeah. The class I was in, it was very like kind of like a theater setup where like the
Oh,
chairs
yeah?
go up and
Oh,
everything. So
wow.
I was back and forth, in front of the class, making sure everybody knew that they had my full attention.
You're, like, on stage or something, that's pretty cool.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's
But
awesome.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up because I thought it was great how in this paper how they had 3 instructors,
Yeah.
because especially with the Zoom thing, That's kind of what I struggled with teaching the COVID lecture. So I had broke them out into breakout rooms for one of their activities, and I'm trying to go into each breakout room to give each group some me time, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh crap, the time is up, and I've only been to like three
Yeah.
groups. So yeah.
And it's neat that you could actually, I think one of the neat things from this pandemic, if there is such a thing, is that we've gotten more versatile at some of these remote opportunities. And just to hear you say casually, I set up breakout rooms and I'm visiting all of them. It's like, wow, how far we've come since the spring, and thinking
Yes.
about how we can do these things in a remote situation. And when everything goes back to quote unquote normal, will there still be some of these remote opportunities that will continue to occur? I imagine doing things between campuses, things like that. Now that we have this technology, I'm sure these are still going to be things we have to be versatile at. So the skill acquisition for instructors, I think, is pretty good here. Again, not that I wish the pandemic was still going on or gone or whatever, but just
Right.
like might as well get something out of the experience while we're here, right? So,
Right, right. And I definitely think that truthfully, this has been long overdue actually.
mhm.
Because me being in bioinformatics focused, dry lab, working on the computer all the time, the technology for all this stuff has been here, and it's been here kind of for a while. And so I always, and also, so I live an hour away from my university,
Oh, all the
out in
better.
the country. Yeah. And
Yeah,
so I just always never understood, even when you're in like industry, like why do we have all these meetings? Like
yeah,
can't we be discussing these things through email and getting more work done, you
yeah.
know? And or, hey, maybe somebody might not be able to be in class. Well, you have a smart board and there's a camera right there in this lovely lecture hall, but you don't use it. You just say, oh, well, you have to be absent. Well, why can't the student be remote and be getting the lecture, or you record the lecture or something? So I really, my fingers are crossed that a majority, that we do go back to face, because even myself, I do like teaching more
Yeah,
face to face. But that we definitely keep a lot of these things and at least integrate them,
yeah,
because I think it will just broaden the lecturing experience. It will be more inclusive to more students and their learning needs, and just their needs as, being adults and navigating being in school while also having a life and everything like that.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Now, you had mentioned, so this is actually very interesting in describing sort of how you read a paper, how you dissect a paper. Let's actually talk about the COVID-19 aspect of it. What did you select paper-wise? Were you looking at some of the emerging literature, or how did you approach actually bringing COVID into the mix?
Yes. So I first was, so in my palm proposal, I was going to talk about climate change, but then as we, saw that this was not going away,
Yeah.
me and Dr. Rout were like, hey, let's talk about COVID. I was like, sure. So again, this is a undergraduate class who are non-majors. So I wanted to keep it not like surface level, but definitely general, very general information. And so in the beginning of the lecture, I started out with, hey, what is a pandemic? What's an epidemic? What is coronavirus versus COVID-19 disease, and kind of lay that.
That one's one that everyone missed, so I'm glad you're doing that. That like coronavirus is not like a thing, but many things, right?
Right. Yes. Yes. And I went up. So I even showed them a phylogenetic tree
Cool.
of the coronavirus and how it has, evolved over the years, and who the different organisms that it can affect and all of those things. Um, and then as we got into the meat of the lecture, then I started to kind of, yeah, present some primary literature. So I think the first one I presented was about it was an article that showed the first COVID patient to contract
Hmm.
the disease twice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so and how they actually showed the different gene expression of the two specimens
Hmm.
and everything. And a lot of hands went up. Got a lot of questions on that slide. And I was so happy that they were asking questions
Yeah.
because I was nervous, I guess, to think that, they just hear what I was saying and just disregard or tune out, be like, okay, and
Yeah.
but they were really interested. So that was great. That was really great.
But
Um
the approach here, I think bringing in this is not a generalist audience, I don't believe, and so the review
yeah.
paper then along with yeah, coronavirus related review and a COVID-19 clinical research article. So coronavirus in the broad, like the idea of all the different types of coronavirus, and then COVID-19 specifically. I like that approach and sort of giving you a chance to consider it in a wider sense and then narrow it down for the more relevant information.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so you mentioned that the article doesn't really have that much results, but I do like, the assessment results. But I was really hoping that they also would show the students quiz
Hmm.
results and then compare what, how students think they're doing, basically, what they think they've learned and all this stuff to what is tangible, showing them what they did actually learn.
Yeah.
I didn't see that, and I just think that, I don't know why they left that out.
Yeah, I mean, what you have here is mostly self-assessment, and there's something to be said about self-assessment in terms of what it can tell you and what it cannot tell you.
Mhm.
So there's certainly more that probably should be done here, but as just giving people ideas or sort of inspiring people to ask more questions about this, like you yourself had said, you hadn't really. Had data, but like you anecdotally you could tell, right, something was effective,
Mhm.
and it'd be neat to maybe try to quantitate that or get that down on paper in
Right.
terms of actual data.
Yeah.
This in and of itself sort of gets you to the same place where it's like, oh yeah, this makes sense, and maybe I can do some kind of model for myself.
Yeah. I love figure 2 because, I'm reading figure 2 and I'm like, so it's just somewhat agree, strongly agree. I was like, so no one chose disagree or strongly disagree. I was like, this is great.
Yeah, seriously. I'm doing the math. Make sure it adds up to 100 yet.
Right.
Put in a pie chart, but it somehow adds up to 80 or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, so it certainly inspires maybe doing more on this. I mean, COVID won't be here forever, but it's certainly something that's going to be interesting to people to
Mm.
read about as a real world model for the foreseeable future. And so this remains, I think, a pertinent topic that you could draw from.
Yeah. And as we talk about that, when you talk about like a introductory biology class with either non-majors or having both non-majors and majors, I mean, maybe that is how we should approach it, is to, because I mean, there's all great types of human health topics that I feel like a lot of students are interested in, and it's not just cancer, because a lot of people like to,
Yeah, they will. Yeah.
yeah, do a lot of lectures and stuff on cancer. But like you said, presenting COVID, presenting, I don't know, things about nutrition, a lot of articles about the microbiome and how that intersects with our overall health and everything
Right.
like that.
And if it's a hodgepodge course, so like you described before, climate change, sustainability,
Mhm.
those kind of issues. Like I've selected textbooks when I do classes like this that deliberately draw quote unquote real world, like whatever that means in this situation, but just things that get people engaged as best as possible when passion for science might not be what's bringing them to the table, as opposed to I have to be here to graduate.
Mhm, mhm. I always found like uh when they would talk about specifically like obesity or just things that like, everybody generally knows,
Yep.
you know, and then kind of segue all the biology and numbers and everything in there. And it's like they kind of don't even know they're talking about it after, they get into it. So,
Very cool.
mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely inspired by the idea. I definitely like. I mean, it's always, of course, more work if you want to draw things that are so pertinent like this, because you have to draw from. You can't just pull out your notes from last year because this isn't in last year. But um, if I'm always concerned about how to properly present primary literature, and I certainly am, being able to take an approach like this where you're actually thinking about something in real time. And as you pointed out, even when COVID-19 goes away, there's certainly going to be the continuation of relevant topics that we can go to.
Mm,
That probably stands the best way I can get people. Figures are always going to be a slog, right? Like, how do you do particular techniques? How do you
mhm.
explain that sort of thing? But at least, how do I get them in the door in terms of engagement by having something that they can really grab onto, right? Something they can really get interested in.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, you're so right though. Figures, even in person, especially when you get into those just all numbered just graphs, really, all the different types of graphs and everything.
Excel. Yeah.
It's just you can see it on their face. They're just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like what is going on?
And I'm
Um,
talking, and I'm just like,
but
you
you just
understand
gotta
it.
take it little pieces.
You're going through and you feel like you have to finish your
Mhm.
sentence. I'm like, you don't understand a thing I'm saying right now, do you?
Yes, right.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
But
Well, thank you. I mean, this is sort of with just one other person. It's sort of a nice, short and sweet conversation. But I feel like you've given me some neat ideas of thinking about ways I could approach this in my own classes. So I thank you for that.
great.
Um, and just like I said, reflecting on how to present primary lit, but also how to use current events. I like the confluence of this. Like, that's why it was fun for me to think about this with a relatively short paper, but I think a really provocative paper.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
Definitely.
cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. Sort of a private audience discussion here, but it's still a lot of fun.
Yes. I can talk for days, so
I,
hey.
trust me, that's very helpful in situations like this. Thank you for coming, and we will see you next time.
Okay.